Okay, last but definitely not the least is Sydney Rogers, who is the Student Honors Organization President, who has presented an earlier version of her thesis at the National Collegiate Honors Conference in Chicago, and it was definitely going on to graduate school in criminal justice. It's only a matter of which university she chooses at this point. Her advisor, Dr. Nicholas Alba, is not able to be here in person, but has given me something to read as an introduction to her thesis. So from Dr. Alba, I am very happy to introduce Sydney Rogers' honors thesis presentation on policing in schools, SROs, and the school to prison pipeline in Guilford County. I first met Sydney when she took Introduction to Sociology in the spring of 2021. That semester, we read a book by sociologist Victor Rios about the criminalization and racial profiling of children and teenagers in Oakland. The book was called Punished: Policing the Lives of Black and Latino Boys. I remember that Sydney read the book carefully and made good points about it. 3 years later, Sydney has written her own study of the same problem, this time focusing on schools here in Guilford County. Sydney's thesis deals with a difficult and controversial topic: racial disparities in our schools and the school to prison pipeline. But Sydney's work is based on hard data. Every point she makes on the thesis is based on data. Sydney's thesis is an excellent piece of social science research about a timely and pressing issue, both in North Carolina and the United States. That kind of intro, I'll hand you over to Sydney.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, hello everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. All right. So in case you're just tuning in, I am Sydney Rogers, and I am doing my thesis on SROs, their impact on the school prison pipeline in Guilford County. So if you're sitting there, you're wondering, what's an SRO, what's school prison pipeline? Sydney, I'm going to be lost throughout this entire presentation. Do not worry, I have some definitions up here for you so you can have a baseline knowledge. So SROs, or school resource officers, are sworn police officers who work in a school setting at least part-time to protect the school and to prevent crime from occurring on campus. In most areas, these are mainly in middle schools and high schools. However, some of them will have a few in elementary schools, depending on what resources are available and what's needed for that community. Additionally, the school prison pipeline is defined as a collection of policies and practices. Schools often utilize that given pathway for students to end up in the criminal justice system. So there are two ways of enforcing this pipeline. There's direct enforcement, which is mainly your referrals to the juvenile justice system and arrests that occur on campus. However, there is an indirect enforcement, which is defined by disparities within suspensions, expulsions, testing scores, as well as the overall culture of discouragement amongst particular students. Though the study is mainly focusing on direct enforcement, the indirect enforcement is also important to keep a note of and be aware of the consequences of that. So as previously mentioned, the research on SROs is very controversial, and it's currently very divided on whether or not SROs contribute to the school prison pipeline. A lot of these divisions occur in discipline, so many of your criminal justice researchers will find that there is no contribution to the school prison pipeline. However, if you get more into the sociology or education-based research, a lot of them do find that SROs contribute to the school prison pipeline. However, one study got me very interested in this topic at Conference et al. From 2020, and they suggested that having more SROs in schools makes schools more likely to have higher crime rates and more severe responses to crime. And that being said, there are multiple factors that can result in this, including the possibility that schools with more SROs are more likely to be enforcing laws. So that got me wondering, do different expectations of SROs lead to different results? And that is what my main research question is covering. I'm asking, do departmental policing styles make a difference regarding SROs impact on a school policing pipeline? And just spoiler alert ahead, I do actually find that does make a difference. So when I'm saying departmental policing styles, I'm specifically referring to the work that James Q. Wilson did in his book Varieties of Police Behavior. And what he did is he looked at 8 different police departments to see how patrol officers carry out their duties and responsibilities. And what he found is that there were 3 main policing styles that departments used, different philosophies and different hierarchies. And here I have them listed out. The three are legalistic, service, and watchdog. Legalistic is more focused on enforcing actual laws. Service has more of an emphasis on community service and building relationships within the community. And watchdog is prioritizing mainly maintaining order. And just one thing to note is that oftentimes police departments do not consciously pick out these policing styles. It often comes down to a matter of the different economical, socioeconomic, and geographical factors. For example, watchdog is very common in rural blue-collar areas because oftentimes those police departments do not have the resources to focus on service style approach, or a legalistic approach. That being said, my personal hypothesis was that police departments that utilize more of a service style approach will have less crime in schools. So through my study, I was looking at 3 different areas within Guilford County. For confidentiality reasons, I renamed these areas to be Area A, Area B, and Area C, all served by their respective police departments. So for example, Department A serves Area A, and so on and so forth. So Area A is more of an urban area. Its population is about 250 to 300,000 people, most of whom are communities of color. 41% are Black or African American, and 39% are white. Area B, while there are some urban areas, it's mostly suburban. Its population is 100,000 to 150,000 people. And unlike Area A, Area B is mostly white. That ratio is 44% identifies white, 32% identifies African American. Area C was a little bit trickier to define. When I was doing interviews with the police department, I was just kind of told, it's anywhere that's not Area A or Area B. So according to Guilford County Schools, that's 10 towns, most of them being rural. The population from each town ranges from as little as 500 people to 15,000 people. And most of these towns are a white majority. Looking at all those towns, the mean percentage was about 69%. And based on multiple factors and multiple sets of data that I'm not going to go into in depth, I assigned all these departments to a different policing style. So Department A utilizes more of a service style, Department B utilizes more of a legalistic style, and Department C has more of a watchdog style. So to answer my question, I broke down to 3 parts. So the first part, I wanted to see, what the Guilford County schools and individual police departments thought SROs should be and should act. So I did an analysis of the memorandum of understanding, and I did interviews with departmental leadership. And then I decided to look at the overall crime and violence within the areas. So I looked at juvenile arrest data from the police departments and school crime and violence data from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And then just see what the racial disparities are. I looked at the racial distributions of school-based juvenile complaints, juvenile arrest data again, and then looked at the racial distribution of the prison population data within North Carolina from the Department of Public Safety. So a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, is an agreement between multiple parties on a particular issue. So in this case, it would be an agreement between the schools and the police departments on what defines an SRO and what their duties are. A new one's made every year. However, the most recent one available to the public was signed in March 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And the primary purpose of that was to clarify the response to non-emergency school disruptions. So what they agreed upon is that SROs are only to respond to actual criminal activity. They had to utilize other methods of discipline before arrest, and they shouldn't send the student to court unless safety of school was at risk, it would provide a positive outcome for the student, or it would help the officer obtain resources they cannot get otherwise. So I ended up doing interviews with leadership from Department A and Department C. Department B said I did not reply to any inquiries of an interview. However, on a base level, Department A and Department C operate about the same. They provide SROs to all middle schools and high schools within their respective areas, and their main priorities are safety and security and our relationship with students. However, Department A had more of an emphasis on building and maintaining relationships between officers and students, as they had found that having those strong connections and positive interactions lead to safer school environments. Whereas Department C had more of an emphasis on utilizing divergent programs provided by the state. At the bottom here, I have deference rates, meaning those are cases that are not handled in court. 94% of Department A's cases are deferred, whereas Department C, 85% of their cases are deferred. As I did not get an interview with Department B, I do not have their deference rate, that's not publicly available. However, according to their website, they serve all middle schools and high schools within Area B. So now going into the data section of this. So I'm looking at juvenile arrest data from January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2022. And this was provided by Department A and Department B. Department C had many conflicts, including towns did not have a police department at all, or they were from another county. So it just made collecting data from that department very inefficient. So here I have a comparison between Department A and Department B. As you can see, the raw number of arrests are relatively the same. Department A had about 3,600 cases, whereas Department B had about 3,000. However, one thing to note is that Area A is twice the size as Area B, meaning by ratio, Department B had actually more arrests than Department A. And so each year, schools are legally required to submit reports to the State Board of Education regarding school crime and violence, and that is put into a consolidated data report that North Carolina Department of Public Instruction publishes every school year. This is regarding 16 specific acts. They are all listed. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the most common in Guilford County are assault on school personnel, possession of a weapon, and possession of a controlled substance. And so here I have a comparison of the median of total number of acts per 1,000 students from the 2021-2022 school year based on the schools that were supported by each department. So as you can see, Department A supports 25 schools, Department B supports 10 schools, and Department C supports 9 schools. Department B, again, similarly to the juvenile arrest data, had a larger number. Their median was about 15 acts per 1,000 students. Interestingly enough, Department A and Department C had relatively low numbers, despite Department A having the most schools. Department A had about 8 acts per 1,000 students, and Department C's median was about 7 acts per 1,000 students. Though those numbers are great, we cannot talk about the criminal justice system without talking about the racial disparities within it. So figure 1 is talking about the school-based juvenile complaints from the 2021-2022 school year. And what that is just those juvenile referrals come straight from the school. And as you can see, Black students make up the vast majority of those complaints from that school year. I do not have this up here, but 2018 to 2019, those numbers are relatively about the same. Figure 2 and figure 3 are looking at the racial distributions of the juvenile arrests from Department A and Department B respectively. And as you can see, Black juveniles make up the vast majority of those cases as well. And so just to get a bigger picture, I want to look at the racial disparities within prison populations. So figure 4 is regarding the North Carolina male prison population, and figure 5 is regarding the North Carolina female population. So as you can see, in each age group, Black men make up the vast majority of male prisoners. However, in figure 5, the interesting thing is that white females make up the vast majority of female prisoners. So we're not seeing that pattern occur within female prisons, but we're seeing that in male prisons. So in conclusion, yes, prison silos do make a very big difference on the impact of the school, as far as the impact on the school prison pipeline. Schools who are supported by police departments that put more emphasis on maintaining positive relationships within their schools, such as Department A, saw a lower ratio of reported crime and violent incidents than schools supported by police departments that do not have the same emphasis, such as Department B. Department C is kind of in a weird gray area. There's not a whole lot of research on SROs in rural school districts. That's again need to fill. However, Department A and Department C also saw very high occurrence rates. However, that doesn't mean much when we don't have Department B's to compare that to, and we need to look at the racial disparities within the cases that do go to court. That being said, Black male students in Guilford County are being impacted by a school prison pipeline at a much higher rate than other races and other groups. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
We have 15 minutes for questions.
Yes, is this something that you might bring up to the departments in question? Or like, is this research that you might be able to apply to the county?
So it's and that's a really good question. I didn't think about bringing this up to the departments, just out of thinking that's what I didn't have a chance to invite them. But it was really interesting because Department A had such concerns, and it seems like their methods are very effective. I don't know what Department B's philosophy is lying, just based off of data. But it would be really interesting to see how that is. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a question, but I always find it curious and interesting and maybe frustrating, right? That the attempt to create a safe space for students in middle and high school, right? That's a laudable goal, right? But too often it seems like it also is creating. Not really just I think there are ways of thinking of the pipeline beyond just our kids getting arrested, right? But in terms of creating a context, how can you say it, making our schools more prison-like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That this is there's a police officer in the hallway, right? And a metal detector at the door. So we're already treating students like criminals or potential criminals. And that's, I think, deeply problematic. It just frustrating.
No, it definitely is deeply problematic, and also you have to step in the fact that many racial groups do not have many positive interactions with police officers as a whole. So they're coming into these environments where they're supposed to feel safe, and there's an officer there present, and it just takes away that safety.
Yeah, depending upon your background, a police officer looks like safety to you or like a threat, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the barriers that you faced in getting the disparity data from, is it the group C and
Yes, or group, whichever group it was. Yeah, Department C, so, again, 10 pounds. When I was doing the interview, I was trying to figure out, what does Department C serve? Because that wasn't just very clear. And so I heard that, I was like, okay, because Department C does not deal with those counts, juvenile arrests. They often have their own police departments that are just very small, they don't have enough officers to be SROs. However, I was doing more research, I found that many of the very smaller towns don't have police departments at all, and they're often relying on Department A or Department B to have conduct those juvenile arrests. And there were also several towns that, they were border towns and they were bordering off like Randolph County or Alamance County. And so that's where their police departments were, and it's just, I was trying to focus on one county and just make it, yeah. But a really good question, thank you. Yeah.
See, this isn't as on topic, but what you were talking about with the different policing styles made me think about, about the National Guard and the police being deployed in the subways in New York. Like, what effect, given what you know about policing styles, what effect do you think that would have?
So, that generally depends, because I think right before they had National Guard, there was a lot of safety concerns in the subway, like a lot of violent attacks. The National Guard is very different because it's not a community space, it's not just everywhere, so they're probably more legalistic generally. And when you're deploying the National Guard, you're going to be more focused on enforced laws. I think it would just depend on, are they just there to make sure violent attacks don't occur? Are they there to police people jumping the subway rails and getting in for free, stuff like that? Yes, Dr. Linda.
I was curious, in the inner city schools, how many police did they have versus B versus C? Did
So-
she have one? Did the inner city school have 2 police officers?
So, in Department A, I know for a fact that they have 1 officer per school that they serve. Area B actually has some schools with 2 officers. They also have a smaller department, so some of those officers are going into multiple schools at a time. But for the most part, each school has only 1 SRO.
In your reading, if there was an incident, if there was an incident at a school, was the officer there just part-time? Then once the incident happened, they're
So-
on campus all through school? I'm just curious if you're.
I don't know how, again, Department B operates, they did not respond to any inquiries for the interview. They were very difficult to get a hold of. But my assumption would be 1 officer is at that school and the other officers at the other school, because oftentimes they would be in pairs and at the same school, so that's how I'm assuming they did it. But I wouldn't know.
Just curious, because I worked at a high school. When one year, I don't always see the officer there, unless they were called by administration. And then and maybe I would see the part-time maybe a bit longer, if the serious of the threat, and then if a teacher was threatened, or there was some serious incident, they were there full-time all the time. Same.
Different departments do it very differently. It's very interesting to see how they implement SROs. Yes, Dr. Cook.
So this might not be something you can like look at easily or have enough data, but would the racial identity of the SRO officer make a difference?
That is a very good question. I don't know what each ethnicity of the individual officers are. I didn't get a chance to look at individual officers. However, I can tell you that Department A is a very racially diverse police department. They have many officers of color. The person I interviewed was an officer of color. They were SRO for many years. So I'm sure that also impacts it, like just having that representation present is very good for the students as well. But it'd be really interesting to see like how individual schools compare. Yes.
I'm just gonna piggyback off of that. I just kind of thought about this. I wonder if there's a correlation between like how ethnically diverse the police department is with like the way that they police, like their policing style.
Oh yeah, that would definitely be interesting, especially if it's already in a racially diverse area.
Yeah.
Maybe my question would be, and this is definitely beyond the scope of your project, but I have a feeling you're gonna keep going at it in graduate school. But one question I might have is like, what policy suggestions might come out of your research?
Definitely kind of like the suggestion of having more awareness of how SROs are impacting students, and more a emphasis on building stronger connections with the students. Because apparently that does help a lot with reducing crime and making safer student environments. But they get a chance to look at policy, so.
And another interesting avenue to look at it would be to see the equivalence of SROs in other countries. I went to elementary school in Singapore. We had headmasters. We follow the British schooling system, and his enforcement was a cane, a bamboo cane. And it's for real. So like he was the most feared person in the entire school, and you only need one for the entire school. But it could be a cultural thing too. I have a feeling a bamboo cane won't work so well in the United States. So that would be an interesting sort of comparative studies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I remember hearing a story on like WUNC about paddling in some.
Oh yeah, some schools still do paddling, rural North Carolina schools.
Bring back the stockade.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Sydney.